All right, well, we are on our second to last BZ principle of the year, and we are talking about evaluation and a what's next mindset. So the goal of this whole thing throughout the whole year was to talk about the idea of being resolute, the idea that our world needs people that are strong, but I don't just mean by strong like, hey, I was going to say a butthead, so I guess I should just say it anyway, are bullheaded or a butthead, but strong in the way that you understand your convictions, you understand the people that you're serving, you understand the people that you are serving with, and you are taking purposeful action to be that. We live in a world that things can happen, and if you want a funny story, come see one of us later that we're here this morning of all the things that happened this morning. I mean, just to give you a little bit, my iPad is shattered. Just little things that have happened, and if you don't have that idea of resolute, what does it mean to push through when things seem to be falling apart? So, how does evaluation, how does a what's next mindset apply to that? I guess I kind of want to give you this. To be resolute is basically to be relevant. The idea of resolute, the purposeful action, is the idea to be relevant, not reverent. We are reverent to our Lord and our Savior and to Scripture, but we do not have to be reverent to every idea that has come before us. You are not museum curators. Like if you go to the Smithsonian in D.C., they are curating these exhibits that have been there for decades, some of them. Well, guess what? We live in a world where our lives and our situations change, maybe moment by moment, but definitely daily, right? So you really need to be that farmer. So I grew up in rural Indiana. Actually, I grew up in Indianapolis, but my uncles and everybody lived out in rural Indiana, and they had farms and they had just different things. And I watched them every single day, especially in the spring, because in the spring, you could have the place where it is gorgeous weather yesterday, and then today we're going to get the place where we're going to get rained on. So the whole concept of a farmer is you take every day, every hour as it comes at you with the understanding that the goal is to get as much out of the ground that you can or out of those animals that you can. So my uncle would always tell me, is as a farmer, you never know what today will hold. So he is always at the end of the day, he would always have to evaluate what are the things that I didn't get done today because it was raining like cats and dogs today, and what are those things I need to get done tomorrow so that when we get to harvest time, the corn is ready, the soybeans are ready, or when it becomes to butcher the chickens, what is it going to take to make sure that they are giving the biggest yield that I would need from that? So that's kind of evaluation. It's not being reverent, it's being relevant. Because if it's reverent, then put it up in the museum and nobody touch it. So most of the things that you do in life are going to be about you being relevant on a continual basis. So a couple statements before we jump in. To be resolute is bigger than you and your personal preferences. So you might think this whole idea of resolute to up to this point is like, this is what I believe. Well, guess what? You can believe that, but a lot of times in being resolute as a leader, you've got to put your personal preferences on the back burner. So sometimes you'll hear people with personalities say, well, I'm a high D on the DISC profile. Or if you go to Enneagram, I'm a 1, I'm a 3. I don't even know what these numbers are. But I'm all these different, I'm in Myers-Briggs, I'm an extrovert. But guess what? At times, to be resolute, you have to take those personal preferences and bend to the will of the group. And that's being resolute in that group. The second statement is to be resolute is to serve others with truth, consistency, and their benefit in mind. Who cares if you're resolute if you're just a jerk? I've met people like that. I'm never going to change. This is who I am. This is what I'm going to do. No, to be resolute, purposeful action, the goal of it is to know what the best interest of those that you are serving. All right? So how do we do it? So we've talked about the different letters in there. We've talked about empathy. We talked about solving problems. We've talked about being open to change. But today we're going to talk about evaluation and a what's next mindset. So before we do that is to be resolute, to be relevant, you must evaluate what has happened. So you've got to see what's happened. So this morning, what has happened? iPad broke, technology not working, real loud cart going down the hallway. All the things that have happened today, you got to evaluate that and say, okay, how do I make those things maybe not as noticeable next time? So you've got to be able to evaluate, and you got to embrace the what's next mindset. Yeah, if I go back about 35 minutes, maybe I can keep my iPad from falling. Maybe if I close the door earlier, I could keep the cart from being a distraction a little bit. Maybe if I did this or I did that, you guess what? You've got to embrace that's what's next mindset, because you can't control what just happened. All you can do is move forward and take care of what the opportunity's been in front of you. Some of you are nursing majors. You're going to deal with that on an everyday basis. Educators, you're going to deal with that on an everyday basis. Rufus, when you're coding, you're going to have to deal with that on an everyday basis. Spencer, same thing. Everything in life needs to have a what's next mindset. Not that you forget about the past, but you go, okay, that happened. Now how do I adjust? And how do I embrace what's going to happen next in my life? So let's start with evaluation. Evaluation does a couple of things. It confirms what went well, right? It confirms your strengths. It confirms maybe some opportunities and some weaknesses you had. So that's kind of why you evaluate. So at the end of an event or at the end of even a course, you evaluate. So after today, I'm going to evaluate, okay, was the reason that I dropped my iPad because I was too busy trying to get too many things done? Maybe I need to slow down. Maybe I need to get here a little bit earlier. So I'm going to evaluate all those things that have happened so that I can have a what's next mindset. So 2 ways of evaluating I want to give you this morning is time management. Yeah, you guys all struggle a little with time. I know, I do as well. Show me where you spend your time. I will show you where your priorities are. Let me say that one more time. Show me where you spend your time, and I'll show you where your priorities are. So what I would challenge you when I evaluate, I usually once every 6 months take 2 weeks and evaluate how I spend my time. So I've got a spreadsheet, and every 30 minutes to every hour, I put down what I did in that hour or that half hour. And I say, okay, was it a high impact? Was it a low impact? And then at the end of the 2 weeks, I look for the similarities, and I go, man, I spent way too much time watching this show, or I spent way too much time worried about this process. And I could see where my time was spent, and then I can evaluate that. So I do that. So I would challenge you to do that, is look at where your time gets spent, because it doesn't happen like this and you start wasting time. It's like, hey, I'm going to start watching The Office. And then 4 months later, you're like, hey, I've watched The Office every night for 2 hours. And you're missing those opportunities. I'm not saying you can't watch Netflix or Disney Plus or Hulu or whatever it is, but the idea of it is it's really easy for your time to get off track. So you've got to make sure that you're evaluating that. Another evaluation that I do after situations, or even, you're going to laugh at me, after our family vacations, I do a SWOT analysis. Okay, what were the strengths of this thing? Why? Because I want to make sure that this family vacation, if there were some strengths, let's build upon them. What were the weaknesses? Okay, what went wrong? Well, driving and leaving at 1 o'clock in the morning with a group of teenagers, like my oldest kids, probably not the best idea anymore because they're grumpy. What are the opportunities? So then I jump into threats. What are the threats? Well, the threat would be driving through the mountains in a snowstorm. All right, maybe check the weather before I leave. So these are all the things that maybe I don't get out a piece of paper, and I really don't get out a piece of paper. Don't think I'm a nerd. But I do think about, okay, what are these things that I'm learning from this trip so that I can make the next trip better? Same thing with our budgeting and our finances. Every year, I'm like, okay, what were the strengths, the weaknesses? What were the threats of that? What went wrong? Okay, well went out. A car broke down. So what are the opportunities? So when you look at a SWOT analysis, strengths and weaknesses are internal. They're based upon you. Your threats are external. You can't control if the weather is snowing. You all know that, right? You're not a god or anything. You can't control when the weather is snowing. But you can also, so those are external. Your opportunities is looking at, okay, the strength of this family vacation was time together. Well, man, when I get back, maybe Keegan and I need to set up a time weekly where we go to Beans and Cream and get a cup of coffee. Maybe Audrey and I need to go out and throw the softball, or maybe Ethan and I just need to sit down and watch. He likes watching YouTube and watch YouTube. So how do you build upon those strengths? Those are opportunities. How do you take those opportunities and correct your weaknesses? All right, I was too busy with my work when I was on vacation, so maybe the next opportunity is I'm going to leave my computers and my iPads at home next vacation and not bring them with me. On a threat, well, yeah, I'm going to check the weather before I drive to the mountains of West Virginia. These are all the things that I try to do on a regular basis because I don't want to just go through life doing the motions, and I know that if I don't do that, I tend to react, not to respond. So if I don't take the time to evaluate and adjust and figure out what's next, then I'm going to respond and say something or do something or think something that I'm going to regret and I don't want to do. So that's why evaluations are there. So once you've evaluated, you have this thing, oh, that just went too far. You have this thing called a what's next mindset. And what I mean by what's next, it's the idea of looking at, okay, here's what happened today, but what does God have for me tomorrow? Here's what happened right now in this class. Yeah, I didn't get the grade that I wanted, but I'm walking across campus. What's next? What's the next thing? Maybe there's somebody that I'm going to come across that just making eye contact with them could change their trajectory of their day. So the whole idea of a what's next mindset is not forgetting completely the past. It's using the past going, okay, I didn't do well in my class, but I can't change that right now because class is over. You all aren't in the Harry Potter thing where you, like Hermione Granger, and you got that little twirly thing, and you can go back in time a little bit. You can't do that. But the whole idea is you can't fix what has happened, but you can embrace what's going to happen. That's really, 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 really extremely, although big words, difficult. Because it's not fun to look at what's next, because we're wired to think, oh my goodness, woe is me, I did bad on my class, woe is me, I've got a problem with my friends, woe is me, I broke my iPad, woe is me, woe, 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 all the way down. We're not wired to go, okay, that happened, now what's next? But that is a powerful thing to be, with the understanding that you're not saying what's next and not caring about what happened in the past. You're embracing the evaluation, and then you're moving on to what's next. So when I look at being resolute, as a parent, I need to be aware of how my kids are responding right now. When you have a 15 and a 13-year-old, there's a lot of different things that they're going through their little brains and their emotions right now. I need to know that because I need to treat them different than I would treat my 10-year-old, who I just look at Ethan and go, Ethan, that was not very smart, and he starts crying. I say, Keegan, that's not very smart, and Keegan's like, how dare you? Or Audrey, just give me the silent treatment. You have to understand and evaluate that so that you can address what's next on that process. When I pick them up from school, I know how to respond to them because I'm evaluating their body language when they walk to the car. I'm usually evaluating how they sit down in the car, how they shut the door, or not shut the door, maybe slam the door, or how they say something to their siblings. You can evaluate that, and I take that and I go, okay, what's next on the way home? For this next mile down the road, what's next? Keegan from tennis practice last night had a great time. I could evaluate him walking up. Lauren was there. He was smiling and laughing. So I knew when he came in the car, man, I got a great opportunity for the next mile to talk his ear off, ask him questions. That doesn't always happen, but if you don't have that evaluation mindset in there looking at situations, then you can't ask yourself the question, what's next? It's a hard thing to do, but I'm telling you, to be resolute, to be that person that people can count on consistently, they can depend on you, you've got to have that purposeful action of, I'm going to really try to understand people. What better gift than that is to understand people? If you look at the life of Jesus, didn't he really seek, well, he was God, so he understood us, but didn't he seek to listen? There were times that even I think of when Jesus went to see Mary and Martha after Lazarus died. His first thing is not like, hey, what's next? We're going to raise him from the dead, y'all, so just chill out. What's the first thing that he did? He cried with them. He evaluated the situation. It sounds very heartless, but it's not. He cried with them. He said, they need me to embrace the fact that I am sad that my friend is gone. And in embracing that and evaluating that, the what's next happened, and we all know the end of that story, right? So don't be afraid to evaluate. I think we're afraid to evaluate sometimes because we don't want to be honest with ourselves. Because when you really evaluate, you've got to peel away the armor and be like, okay, what really went well? What really did not go well? What were some threats? So that you can embrace a what's next mindset. That's what it means to evaluate and to have a what's next mindset.